Hi, I'm Ken LaRue from Autodesk, and I want to share with you some of the updates that have been added to the preview animation process in 3ds Max 2020. First, let's look at the Create Animation Preview dialog box from 2019.3 and the new version in 2020. We've organized the layout of the dialog box to be more intuitive, but offer the artist more options when creating a preview animation. By default, the image size is now 100%, but you can increase the percentage all the way up to 200% or any percentage in between. The default preset values now match the 3ds Max viewport settings, but of course this can be changed if you need to. In the Overlays section, we've added the ability to use Max script snippets that can be executed during the process of creating the animation. For example, maybe you want the name of your camera added to your preview animation. You would do this by adding a Max script snippets, and then inside your rendered file will have the camera's name. There's also a Play When Done option, which will automatically open the preview once it is completed instead of asking you if you want to save it as in previous versions. The Output section has been simplified while still adding more control over your preview. You can easily navigate to wherever you want your file to be generated. And if you're created an AVI file, you'll be prompted as to what codec you wish to use. Also, the output file name now matches your 3ds Max scene. Then there's the best update, in my opinion, and that's the speed improvement. So let's bring up 3ds Max 2019.3 on the left side, and we'll bring up 3ds Max 2020 on the right side. Understand this is the exact same scene. All the settings for the animation preview are exactly the same, and we'll start them at the same time while timing how long it takes to generate each one of them. We'll speed up the video, but in the end, you will see that 2020 finishes at 52 seconds, while 2019.3 takes 2 minutes and 7 seconds.
Hi, I'm Martin Coven, and I'm a Principal Experience Designer for 3ds Max. And I want to show you some of the latest updates we have for the chamfer tools in 3ds Max 2020. The first one you'll see I have selected an edge, and then I'll add a chamfer modifier, and we are going to do an in bias. So a chamfer in this case is only being chamfering one edge. And you can see after that edge the chamfer terminates along the next edges, and this bias allows you to push it to one end to the other. So you can create these nice sharp edges, or you can push it out to have a more of a fade out than we could before. Okay, this next part is around an inset. So I'll just adjust this a little bit. And what this inset does is it insets along the faces. It's like a face inset, but it uses the same rules as the chamfer does. So any edges that become chamfered, the islands of the faces that make up that chamfered area become inset. And this fixes a lot of the smoothing normals that occur. We have errors that occur, and you'll see this a little bit later. But essentially it's using the same normals as the original face. So here's another case with inset. This time I'm selecting islands of polygons. And then when I apply the chamfer, I'll set the chamfer to use the face borders. So it'll only chamfer around the outside of these selections. Right now you can't see much because the chamfer is just cutting into the face. There's no deformation or anything of the mesh. But I'll put it in wireframe so you can see it. So now you can see the outlines of where the chamfer is occurring. I'll make it a little bit smaller, and then I'll add the inset. And still you really wouldn't be able to see anything, but I'll adjust the amount. And then in this case, the thing that really does it is the offset. So in this case, I'll offset it in a negative amount. So I'm pushing it into the mesh. And as you can see, you get these nice panel lines that are fully adjustable and fully procedural. At any time I can go in and change the selection, and these panel lines will update. Okay, this part is around, we have a new method of setting the amount of chamfer. So we have a fixed amount, and then this is using a crease weight. So it's a varying amount based on a weight that the user inputs. Okay, and this video is just more of a practical example. The other portion was just highlighting what the new features are. And then this is kind of showing how it would be used. So I'm adding a chamfer, putting the size down a little bit so we don't have so much overlapping. And I'll tell it to use hard edges or unsmooth edges, so it's using the smoothing groups. And I'll turn inset on, and you can see it really cleans it up. Turn it on and off again, so you can see the triangulation that happens. And then when I turn on inset, nice and clean. Now I'm setting it to use crease weights to determine the amount of the chamfer. And I'm just going in and I'm making the selections and adjusting the weights in those areas. So this gives the user a lot more control, a lot more flexibility, being able to have multiple widths of chamfers on a mesh, all driven by weights, and it's only one chamfer. Before, you would have to, for one thing, you couldn't make varying weight chamfers. You couldn't have a chamfered edge that was different sizes based on the weight along the length of it. And in order to have a mesh that had individual areas that were chamfered in different sizes, you would have to have multiple chamfers. So either do it in the base mesh or have multiple chamfer modifiers. So I think this is going to be a really nice feature. Okay, one last thing I forgot is the presets. So we can save presets here. So I've got this object selected and I've kind of made a nice panel line setup. So I'll click save. And I'll call this panel lines. And then I can go to another mesh. Make some selection. Maybe take off some of this. Then I'll add the chamfer modifier. And then I'll just select panel lines and load. And I've got panel lines there too.
Hello everybody, I'm Zap Anderson from Autodesk. Today I'm going to talk about what's new with relation to OSL and OSL shaders in the new version of Max. Enjoy the ride. In Max 2020, a lot of work was put into the OSL shaders representation in the viewport. They get automatically transcoded into HLSL for real-time display. The quality of the translation can be shown here in this little indicator. This makes it work even for foreign third-party shader just downloaded off the internet. They still show up in the viewport as this random hexagon shader that I put onto the plate under the sushi. Of course, colors and everything is immediately tweakable. Now, since the underlying code that drives the Nitrous viewport is the same that drives the Quicksilver hardware renderer, this means that OSL is now fully supported in Quicksilver. This is a very nice enhancement to this GPU-driven renderer. It can give you some really nice results. We also threw in some new shaders. Here, for example, is a simple color keying shader, which can be used to do kind of rudimentary green screening straight inside Max. We have the ability to do garbage matting by cutting off the edges. You can have an actual individual mask. Now, this is of course animated, so I think I need to tweak this edge a little bit like this. There, better. Now I simply click the color and pick a color using the eyedropper tool from somewhere on the screen, and boom, I have a decent, not perfect, but good for slap comps keying. Of course, the color isn't perfect, so another shader we threw in is a tritone color corrector, where you have highlights, midtones, and shadows. Here I'm picking them off the background so I can get a result that kind of matches in the color, like this. Very nice. There we have our guy throwing. Very nice. Of course, it looks identical in the rendering as the viewport. You would hear me say this several times here. So it really shows that the viewport can be trusted for these kind of things. Another new one we threw in is a little simple tiles shader that can do tiles in a few different ways. You can tweak the parameters of it, like how the tiles are laid out, like this. There's an ability to tweak the gap distance between the tiles. You can tweak the roundness of the corners of each of the tiles to make them completely square or completely round. There's a little bump mapped edge you can see that gives a little highlight. We can tweak the width of that edge from nothing to really thick. And of course, yes, the renderer will show exactly the same result. I keep saying this, but it's very important. So the work that is done in the viewport can be trusted to translate to the result you do get in the actual rendering. Another fun one is the weave shader. It's kind of a basket weave thing where you can tweak things like the width down from chicken wire to wide bands. You can tweak the flatness to make round or flat things, bendiness, how much it applies to the bump. Obviously, colors are fully editable. The shader is useful for like close-up of cloth, for basket weave stuff of course, but even for stuff like carbon fiber. Another cool one is the half-tone dots shader. This happens to work really well together with the Arnold Toon shaders. Basically screen space dots whose size you can set with an input value, or if we check this box, it gets driven by Arnold Toon shader to be based on the light. So as we move the light, we see dots shrink and grow to create the shading in a very traditional kind of old newspaper manner. We can turn it into hatches like this and keep tweaking the width, base width of the lines with changing this value. Another thing that is often done in toon shading is to use a posterized ramp. So we put our new simple gradient on and we turn up the hardness. This gives like a stair-step gradient, and we want to turn this into kind of a dirty grayscale. So we set some sort of grayscale, but not exactly values, to get that extra toony look of the whole thing. And here we go, we have kind of a toon shading that kind of follows the light. But what if we combine the two approaches? Let's plug the one we had before into the darkest area. So now we have hatches there. We paste in the color. We adjust the line width setting there a little, and it's looking pretty neat, but we're lacking some definition. So what if we drop in a ambient occlusion and connect that as the input value for the line width, and now we have something which gives a very nice definition in the blacks coming from the AO. And then when we start playing with the view or changing the light, we can make very nice results. Here we see clearly how dark it is in the black areas. Finally, we have something called a toon width. It makes lines thicker on the lower left side of everything by looking at the normal vector of the surface and letting that guide the line width. It gives a really nice kind of hand-drawn effect to this. Of course, we have a waveform shader for all your blinking disco floor needs, and if that's not enough, in total we added 14 brand new shaders and we modified 3. The modifications is that the bitmap shader now does UDIMs. The composite shader has all the blend modes, and the tweak shader works almost identical to Photoshop levels and now has a mid-tone spinner. Hope you enjoyed the updates to OSL in Max 2020. Enjoy, thank you. Zap out, over and out.
3dsmax team. I'd like to show you some of the latest updates to the Revit import workflow in 3dsmax 2020.
Okay, so I'm going to start by showing you the behavior in 3dsmax 2019 update 3. So this is the latest version before the 2020 release. I'm just going to go ahead and import my Revit scene, Revit model. You'll see that it's a 2019 Revit model, so no upgrade necessary. So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to use this view, which has only windows and furniture on it. And I want to take a quick look at the options for combination. Now, the significance of combination is when we import a model, we want to, as best as possible, organize the geometry in a way that makes it easy to work with, particularly for assigning materials, as well as reducing the number of nodes to improve, to help performance. So, the options are combined as one object, so it's just going to be one big blob. That will not allow you to do much with materials. We can combine by material, which will make one object per material in Revit. The challenge there, we'll see in a moment. We can combine by family type, category. Both of those are somewhat problematic because there will be many materials in each of them. And do not combine. So do not combine gives you some flexibility, but results in too many nodes. And in fact, I believe, actually, let's do a quick test of do not combine, because I think you'll actually end up with objects that also do not allow you to manage materials very well. Let's try this just to see what the behavior is. I'm just gonna bring in materials. We don't need the cameras for this test or daylight system. Okay, and let's have a look at what we have. Looks like we haven't combined at all, but you'll see that they're still basically at the object level it was in Revit. So in fact, this table and chairs was a family assembly, and you'll see they all have the same material. And I can't, if I wanted to change the material of the table and not the chairs, that's going to be a problem. So that's not ideal. It looks like there are scenarios like this chair where we see the multiple materials. Let's see if I can change the top of the chair and not the frame. Let's just give that a try. Again, this is the old behavior, sort of doing a preview of where we're coming from and what we tried to solve. So I'm just going to take this shellac material, red, because it's easy to see, and I'll just try to assign it to the seat cushion. And as you can see, it didn't work. We changed the entire chair. Okay, so let's reset the scene, and we are going to bring in the same model. And we are going to combine my material and see what kind of control we get there. Based on the feedback we've had from users, combining by material is the closest that they can get to what they want, because material is one thing that often needs to be updated in 3dsmax in order to really spruce up the rendered scene, get some better materials, better control, higher quality, because otherwise they could just render out of Revit. So let's do the same. Combine material, windows and furniture. I'm going to just bring in materials here. First, we'll see here, this is all the materials that will be brought into the scene. And as a matter of fact, I think there are more here than in use. I could be wrong. We'll find out when we open the scene. We'll just bring them all in and see if there's the same number of items in the Scene Explorer. Let's just have a look.
Okay, so I'm back in the scene. This one has been combined by material, and let's have a look. Actually, let's just go ahead and head back to that chair that we were looking at before. And so now we have the chair frames separate from the chair leathers. So let's go ahead and try the same thing we did before. Chair cushion, sorry. Let's go ahead and take this and apply it to the cushion. That worked, so that's good. But yikes, I see some other stuff that I believe changed at the same time. Let me undo and make sure that that's really true. These guys, let's undo. Yep. Now maybe that's the same material, but maybe it's not. Or intended material, I should say. Now let's take a look at a different case that I know is in this model that wouldn't be as easy to accept as that one, where it's both furnishings and both some sort of leather material, and we might want to change it to the same thing in both cases. This is kind of a common case that probably wouldn't be so ideal. So what I wanted to show you here is that this table and the glass of the windows are assigned the same material, this material called glass cast gray. And let's say I wanted to update those materials in Max. I probably don't want to have the same kind of glazing material for the windows that I would for a solid glass table. And I'm stuck because I'm just going to pick some random material here. If I change the table, it changes the windows. That's not really what I want. So now we're going to look at Max 2020 and see what's been updated to improve the situation. Okay, so here we are in 3ds Max 2020, and I'm going to go ahead and show you what has changed in the import dialog. I also want to take note, I'm actually importing a 2019 Revit file, and it will not require upgrade because of the work we did to make files compatible. Of course, keep in mind that I do have 3ds Max 2019 installed on my machine as well, and therefore I have the previous version of the Revit core engine, which is actually doing the lifting here and making it so that we don't have to pay the price of upgrade in Max. But anyway, that's sort of an aside. Just wanted to put that reminder out there. So we're going to bring in this file, take a look at the combination options once it comes up. And for the sake of consistency, I'm bringing in the contents of the same view from Revit, windows and furniture, leaving all these options off. And we will see that now we have two new combination options. We have combined by Revit category and material, and combined by Revit family type and material. So that sort of just gives you a little bit more flexibility over the granularity of combination. As you saw in the previous example in 2019, if you combine by materials could be the same across different families or categories, and they would all be lumped together. Now we break those out, so you'll have multiple objects per material, and you'll see that in the Scene Explorer as well. For this example, we'll just stick with category. We could do either one, and it sort of demonstrates the same benefit. I'm just going to turn these guys off again. There we go. You see, this is a much simpler list as well. So rather than listing all the materials over and over again, we just list the two materials and how many nodes will be created per material. So you'll see that actually I apologize, this is the category, not the material. These are the categories and how many materials per category. So in this case, there will be 50 nodes for furniture, which means there are 50 materials used in the furniture category. You'll also see it's not so obvious here because there's only two of them, but this is alphabetical. In 2019, prior to 2019.3, this list was not alphabetized, so it was just in a seemingly random order. I'm sure there was some system to it, but not one that was apparent to the user, so that's kind of a nice cleanup as well. Okay. And here we are back in the scene. Same contents as in the previous example. You can go ahead and take a look at how the Scene Explorer is organized. You have the category first and then the material. So you can obviously go through and select objects like that. Let's take a look at the two examples we were trying to solve for before. Let's go ahead and check out this chair. Let's apply. Again, we're just going to go with materials that show very easily. It's the simplest thing for this example. This red color on that seat cushion. Boom. And okay, so the seat cushion is the same in both cases because they are the same category, and we're going to say that makes sense. Now, again, if you had wanted the blue up here to stay blue, then we could have combined by family type instead. That would have given us the flexibility. So family type and material, because those are different family types, and we could break those apart. I won't be doing that example for the video, but feel free to give it a shot. But again, the more important one was we wanted to change, let's just say, the material on the glazing here without changing the material on the table. This is Autodesk glazing. Let's see how that goes. Just pick that. See if it changes visibly. Yeah, it did change, but that it's still pretty subtle. Let's take something a little bit more noticeable here. Let's try this one. Let's see if this one will do the trick. There we go. So now we've got a nice tinted glass there, and our table glass is still the same. I don't know. Probably pick another material there for the table. Let's just turn it solid white, this kind of ceramic. Really drive the point home. There you go. But you can see anyway, we select them separately, which obviously will ensure that they are not applied the same material. And that's what we got here for the new combination rules. Thank you very much.